The fire ate him slowly. That was the point. Not the quick, clean mercy of a plasma burst, or the silent finality of a neurotoxin. This was fire. Ancient, elemental, and agonizing. It climbed the ceremonial robes of Ambassador Elijah Brandt, turning the white silks of peace into the black ash of a warning. He did not scream. On 1,000 worlds, on countless screens, 1 billion beings watched him burn, and the only sound was the crackle of the flames and the sonorous, self-satisfied voice of the Scaran High Counselor narrating the verdict for all to hear. For the crime of sedition against galactic harmony, for the spreading of malicious falsehoods intended to destabilize the benevolent guidance of this council, the human ambassador Elijah Brandt is hereby purged by the flame of unity. The voice declared, dripping with sanctimony. Let this be a lesson. Harmony is the law is absolute. The feed in O'Malley's Last Stand, a grimy bar on the colony of Promise, was rock solid. A miner, nursing a synthale that tasted faintly of burnt plastic, let his glass slip from his numb fingers. It shattered on the floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the dead silence of the room. The Scaran's voice droned on, a smug eulogy about the regrettable but necessary measures. Brandt's face, serene even as the flames licked at his graying hair, showed only defiance. Then the feed cut away, leaving only the pristine, elegant sigil of the Galactic Council hanging in the air. For a full 10 seconds, the bar was a tomb. The only movement was the slow drip of spilled ale from the edge of the bar. Then, a new signal overrode the council feed. It was a single, stark text directive from the Terran government on a field of pure black. All diplomatic channels closed. All personnel on communications blackout. Stand by. The local news anchor, a woman who had been moments away from delivering a tearful, enraged editorial, simply stared at her prompter, then at the camera. Her mouth opened, then closed. She took off her earpiece, set it gently on her desk, and stood up. She walked off camera. The live feed she left behind showed an empty chair. Across the human sphere, a strange and terrible quiet fell. Public broadcasts flickered to static. Information networks went dark. No chaos erupted, no riots began. Instead, a willed collective holding of breath took its place. 20 billion people turned their backs in silent, coordinated contempt. This quiet was far more terrifying than any scream of rage. The breach charge blew the mag-locked doors of the Terran embassy inward with a deafening concussion. A squad of B-Rog shock troopers clad in gunmetal gray armor and bristling with pulse rifles stormed into the grand foyer. They moved in a brutal wedge, each trooper's steps falling in sync with the others, weapons covering overlapping fields of fire, ready to meet violence with overwhelming force. They found only Leon Velasquez. Calmly sliding a data slate into a padded case, she sat at a polished obsidian table in the center of the vast, empty room. She didn't flinch at their violent entrance, not even looking up until the squad leader, a hulking specimen with 4 eyes glowing a menacing red, stood over her, his rifle leveled at her head. "Where is the broadcast array?" The Byrog snarled, his voice a low-frequency growl, filtered through his helmet's vocoder. "You are transmitting. Cease or be neutralized." Leon finally looked up. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but her expression was one of absolute, unnerving calm. "There is no array," she said, her voice even and clear. "Not here, at least." The troopers fanned out, their rifle optics sweeping the barren room. The embassy had been stripped. No art, no furniture beyond the table and chair she occupied. No blinking server lights, just bare walls and echoing silence. "Scanners show a massive data spike originating from these coordinates less than 1 standard hour ago," the Byrog leader insisted, taking a step closer. His posture radiated frustration. "Entanglement-based encryption. The Tenebrian techs are still screaming about it. They say the data packet was shielded by a viral ghost code they've never seen. You sent something." "I did," Lian admitted. She clicked the latches on her case shut with a crisp final sound. The ambassador's unedited final statement, his full testament, along with a rather large appendix file. She gave a small, tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Evidence, I believe it's called. The complete, unredacted proof of industrial-scale species farming. Names, dates, shipping manifests, profit reports, everything." The Byrog gestured with his rifle, an impatient, angry motion. "They will intercept it. They will decrypt it. It will be erased before it reaches anyone." "No," she said, her voice dropping, gaining a hard, steely edge that made the massive warrior pause. "They won't. You see, the signal wasn't a broadcast. You're looking for a radio tower, but I used a sniper rifle. It was a single, focused burst to a pre-installed pair entanglement communicator buried 2 miles beneath New Canberra. Untraceable. Instantaneous. The data never traveled to Earth. It was already there." She stood, her movements deliberate, not those of a prisoner, but of a host concluding a meeting. "It was there before you even got the call to come kick down my door." The Byrog leader's 4 eyes narrowed. He was a warrior, not a technician, but he understood the strategic implications. They hadn't caught a straggler trying to send a desperate message. They'd walked into the aftermath of a planned, perfectly executed maneuver. Her capture was no failure. It was the final move in her game. A checkmate she had placed on the board herself. "You're too late," she said, her voice a soft echo of what she knew was now happening across human space. "You wanted to make an example of him. You thought you were silencing a voice, but you just gave him the biggest stage in the galaxy." The Byrog leader raised his rifle. "You are under arrest for treason against the Galactic Council." Lian Velasquez simply nodded, as if accepting a formal invitation. "I know." Her calm was a declaration of war. Her surrender was a trigger. She was the distraction, the sacrificial queen drawing their eyes to one side of the board, while 10,000 light-years away, humanity's war machine began to spin. The asteroid mining station, Pallas 9, was a monument to function over form. It was a grimy, rotating torus of pressurized metal and jury-rigged systems, home to 1,000 roughnecks who tore valuable ores from the belt's stony guts. On the command deck of the station, Hannah Forge Sagan watched the Council's broadcast of Brandt's execution, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of a console. Her face, usually smudged with grease and creased with a wry smile, had hardened into granite. When the feed cut to the Terran directive, she didn't say a word. She turned to her crew, a motley collection of belters, Martian expats, and Earthborn veterans who'd found a home in the hard vacuum. They were tough, cynical people, their bodies scarred by industrial accidents and their minds sharpened by the constant threat of a cold, indifferent universe. No speech was needed. Every eye in the room was on her. They had all seen it. They had all heard the silence that followed. Hannah swiped a hand across the holoscreen, dismissing the dead feed. In its place, she pulled up a series of schematics, contingency plans buried deep in the station's core memory, codenamed Project Anvil. They weren't elegant. They were ugly, asymmetrical, and brutalist. They showed massive ore freighters, ships like the Rockbreaker and the Pay Dirt, with their cavernous holds and powerful industrial tractor beams. But overlaid on their familiar frames were new, terrifying additions. Spinal-mounted magnetic accelerator cannons, scavenged from mass drivers, missile pods welded crudely to the hull, and reactor schematics pushed so far into the red that they looked like a madman's doodle. They were Q-ships, decoys, freighters on the outside, warships on the inside. "The Goliath can mount a long Tom Mac," a grizzled engineer named Vicker muttered, already pointing at the screen. His voice was a low rumble. "We can reinforce the keel with the spare plating from Dock 3. It'll scream like a banshee when it fires, but the frame should hold. Once. twice if we brace it against the primary cargo bulkhead. Another voice, a young Martian techie named Atakliz, added. The drive on the pay dirt can be overloaded for a one-shot gravity lance effect. It'll snag the emitters, but whatever it hits won't care. This is madness, a third voice, a corporate liaison, stammered. This is unsanctioned. This is piracy. Vicar turned slowly and fixed the liaison with a flat stare. Man's got a point. This ain't company business. He looked back at Hannah. This is personal. Hannah looked at the faces around her. She saw grief. She saw rage. But beneath it all, she saw something else, a cold, hard, industrial resolve. They weren't soldiers. They were builders. For a fleeting second, she saw Brant's face again, serene in the heart of the fire. He had fought with words. They would fight with steel. Different tools, she thought, for the same damn job. Get to it, Hannah said, her voice raw but steady. I want every gram of refined palladium and every spare power conduit rerouted to the conversion bays. Strip the non-essentials. We're not hauling rock anymore. To the liaison, she added, you can file a complaint, or you can pick up a wrench. Your choice. They began to build. In the grimy heart of the belt, fueled by grief and ingenuity, humanity began to forge its sword. High Counselor Theron of the Kalian, a species known for its logic and meticulous record-keeping, felt a profound and unsettling chill in the triumvirate's high chamber. The room was designed for serenity, a perfect sphere of polished white stone, where the air chimed with the soft, melodic resonance of floating harmony chimes. Today the chimes seemed discordant, their tones subtly, gratingly off-key. Or perhaps it was merely his own internal disharmony. A full communications blackout, gloated Corvus Clor, war leader of the Byrog. His massive reptilian form was draped in ceremonial armor that did little to hide the raw power of his musculature. They sever their own tongue and plug their own ears. This response is that of a frightened child hiding under the blankets, a pathetic display of cowardice. Matriarch Ilara, of the Tenebrian ascendancy, fanned herself with a delicate feathered appendage. Her voice was like honey laced with venom. Indeed, their silence admits their impotence. They know they cannot challenge us. A proper show of force will bring them to heel. Theron remained silent. He was a junior counselor, his species admitted to the council barely 2 centuries ago. His role here was to observe, to record, to agree. But he had known Elijah Brant. He had debated him, had lunch with him, had even, in the privacy of his own mind, admired him. Brant was no coward. His logic was a weapon, his quiet determination a force of nature. This silence conveyed no fear. It felt like a held breath before a plunge. We have moved the 3rd and 5th glorious fleets to blockade their primary system, Sol, Crovus continued, projecting a star map into the center of the room. A crimson ring of icons appeared around a single yellow star. Their trade will cease, their colonies will starve. They will come to us, begging for the harmony they so foolishly rejected. Theron studied the map. The blockade was immense, a definitive show of force, but to create it, they had pulled fleets from across the sector. He saw the icons vanish from patrol routes, from garrison duties, from the guard posts protecting their primary logistical hubs. Their supply lines, the vast intricate network that fed the Byrog war machine, were now exposed. He remembered something Brant had said to him once, over a game of kinetic chess. Your council sees the board, Theron, but you only see the pieces. You don't see the spaces in between. That's where the game is won. For the first time in his life, Theron noticed a hairline crack running up the polished white stone of the chamber wall, almost hidden behind a tapestry depicting the Byrog triumph at the Battle of the Corridors. A small thing, an insignificant imperfection, but it was there, and now that he had seen it, he couldn't unsee it. The harmony chime sounded again, and this time the discordant note was as clear and sharp as a scream. The bridge of the Terran command ship Vengeance was dark, lit only by the soft glow of status screens showing the fleet's disposition. Captain Zara Omandi stood with her feet planted wide, her hands clasped behind her back. She was a statue carved from compressed impatience. For 3 weeks, her third Bastion fleet had been on a long-range survey mission in the Graveyard Nebula. It was a treacherous, chaotic mess of stellar remnants and rogue planetoids that every sane species in the galaxy avoided. Every species except humanity. The nebula's chaotic sensorium made it the perfect place to hide a fleet. It also happened to sit directly adjacent to a stable hyperplane that led straight to the Byrog logistical hub at Corinth, a hub that, according to the latest intelligence, was now minimally defended. A quiet ping echoed on the bridge. Her comms officer, Lieutenant Ivanova, turned from her console. "Ma'am, encrypted flash from HICOM. It's authenticated." Omandi's eyes didn't leave the main view screen, which showed only the swirling, ghostly gases of the nebula. "On screen, Lieutenant." A single word appeared, stark white against the black background. "Ignite." Omandi took a breath. This was it. The culmination of years of contingency planning. "Comms, broadcast to all ships in the fleet. Message begins, execute Operation Anvil. All vessels, full burn to Egress Point Alpha. Weapons free on my mark." She turned to her helm officer. "Take us out of this soup, Mr. Hahn. Let's go make some noise." The Vengeance and the warships of the Third Fleet surged forward, but they weren't alone. From the dark swirling clouds of the nebula, a dozen other shapes emerged. They were ugly, blocky, and asymmetrical. They were the Q-ships from the Belt, their transponders now screaming military designations instead of freighter codes. The TCS Rockbreaker, the TCS Paydirt. They hit the hyperplane exit at Corinth like a fist through plaster. The orbital command station, staffed by a skeleton crew, barely had time to raise the alarm before the first shots landed. "All ships mark!" Ormandi's voice was steel. The Q-ships fired first. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Ormandi watched the sensor feed as the converted freighters unleashed hell. The visual was shocking, but the telemetry was horrifying. She could see the structural integrity warnings flashing on her tactical overlay for each Q-ship. Their hulls visibly groaned on the damage control monitors, frames screaming in protest under forces they were never meant to withstand. Spinal cannons designed to crack asteroids spewed molten metal at relativistic speeds, gutting fuel depots the size of small moons. Overloaded drive plumes lashed out like cosmic whips, turning orbital repair docks into expanding clouds of plasma. The Third Fleet's military-grade vessels followed, their missile salvos and kinetic rounds picking off the few panicked patrol ships that managed to scramble. The battle, if it could be called that, was over in 8 minutes. The logistical heart of the Byrog fleet in this sector was annihilated. Later, in the quiet of her ready room, Ormandi stared at the after-action report. The victory was total, a textbook example of shock and awe, but at the bottom of the screen, a different list scrolled. The casualty report. The TCS Paydirt's reactor had breached after its single devastating shot, vaporizing the ship and its crew of 48. The Rockbreaker's frame had fractured after firing its main gun. The ship was a total loss, though most of the crew were recovered. 4 other Q-ships were critically damaged. 184 names, the first payment for this war. Ormandi closed her eyes, the weight of each name settling upon her. She knew their faces. She had approved their transfers. "We are here to win," she whispered to the empty room. "Nothing else matters." The victory felt cold, heavy, and absolutely necessary. Leon Velasquez was no longer Leon Velasquez attaché. She was now call sign Echo, operating from a hidden communications hub buried deep within the repurposed core of a hollowed-out moonlet, a forgotten relic of humanity's own messy expansion. Here, surrounded by humming server racks and a small team of dedicated comm specialists, she, having been covertly extracted, orchestrated the second front of the war. "They perceive a flood and fight it with firewalls," she said. pacing before a massive holographic display of the Galactic network. "We are something else entirely. A poison, a catalyst." She pointed to a sector of the network colored a placid blue, representing the low-security public feeds of a dozen junior council species. Vector 1, the Trojan horse. We've piggybacked the Brandt testimony onto a routine translator software update. It's benign. It's expected. Millions of civilian terminals will download it automatically. When they do, the testimony, translated and culturally contextualized for each of 42 different species by our best xenolinguists, will play, presented as an included feature, a demonstration of the software's expressive capabilities. A tech to her right, a young man with dark circles under his eyes, nodded. "It's in. They're accepting the patch wholesale. The Gribnar translation is getting particularly high uptake." "Vector 2, Leon continued, her eyes shifting to the tightly controlled networks of the Byrog and Tenebrian home systems. "The black market. We've embedded the data package into the most popular pirated entertainment files. Illicit Tenebrian pleasure sims, Byrog combat sagas. They'll download thinking they're getting their cheap thrills. Instead, they'll get Ambassador Brandt's final words spliced into the code." "Vector 3, she said, her voice dropping, "is for the ones who are already listening. The journalists and dissenters, the quiet idealists like he was." She gestured to a complex web of encrypted dead drops and anonymous relays. "We are not releasing the raw data ourselves. We are putting it on the shelf for them to find. The proof of species farming, the unaltered recordings of council sessions, the financial records showing how the High Triumvirate has been bleeding the junior members dry for centuries." She was a grandmaster, playing a game of informational chess across a galactic board. Her masterpiece was the testimony itself, Elijah Brandt at his best, his words calm and reasoned, his voice filled the hidden bass. "They will tell you I am a traitor to harmony. They are correct. The harmony they speak of is the silence of a cage. The stability they offer is the stillness of a grave. I have seen the Gribnar, their world, choked with the refuse of 100 others while their children sift through filth for survival. I have seen the fields of Kayatha, where a gentle pre-industrial people are harvested like cattle by their Tenebrian patrons. This is not harmony. This is a crime. They will burn me for saying this, but they cannot burn the truth. Truth is not a body. It cannot be killed. It can only be revealed." Leon closed her eyes, listening to the words of the man who had been a father to her. Her grief was a cold, dark star inside her, but from it she drew a cold, precise, and burning light. She would forge his sacrifice from a tragic footnote into the first chapter of a new history. The junkyard world of Gribnar was a planet-sized monument to the Council's harmony. For generations, the Grib, a species of small, dexterous, goblin-like engineers, had been designated to recycling culture. In practice, this meant their planet was the dumping ground for the galaxy's industrial waste. They lived in cities built from scrap, breathing air thick with the metallic bite of ionized particles and the scent of decay. Mrek, a Grib who fancied himself more of an artist than a salvager, was elbow-deep in the guts of a defunct Tenebrian luxury skimmer when the bootleg data file he was downloading finally finished. He traded a working power converter for it, hoping for a pirated copy of Birog Warriors 9 Blood Honor. Instead, his screen flickered and a human face appeared. He grumbled, his fast, chittering speech laced with technical slang. "Scrap heap code, another corrupted file. I swear, these black market slingers use compression algorithms forged from pure incompetence." Then the man started speaking. The Gribnar's standard subtitles that flickered at the bottom of the screen were perfect, not merely translated but fully contextualized. When Brandt spoke of a cage, the subtitles used the Grib word for a reclamation pen, the fenced-off areas where they were forced to live. When he spoke of a grave, the subtitles used the term for slag pit. Mrek stopped working. He listened. When Brandt mentioned Gribnar by name, a jolt went through him. No one mentioned Gribnar. Gribnar was where things went to be forgotten. I have seen the Gribnar, their world choked with the refuse of 100 others, while their children sift through filth for survival. Mrek looked around his workshop, at the mountains of discarded technology, the testament to 1,000 worlds' careless excess. He looked at his own hands, stained with grease and chemical burns. Though not officially a slave, he was a ward of the Council, a part of the galactic ecosystem. He was a maggot, living happily on a corpse, and until this moment, he had never truly considered the nature of the corpse itself. The human on the screen burned, and in Mrek, something ignited. He started small. He and his crew, a handful of other cynical salvagers, hijacked a city-wide network of sanitation drones. They rerouted them, not to the garbage incinerators, but to the local Byrog garrison's motor pool. The next morning, the Byrog woke up to find their heavily armored ground skimmers and troop transports completely buried under a mountain of compacted, foul-smelling garbage. It was petty, it was childish, it was hilarious. That night, Mrek jury-rigged a powerful transmitter from the comms dish of the Tenebrian skimmer. He found a pirate frequency, one used by scavengers to trade rumors and parts. He broadcast his first message, his voice a distorted, high-pitched chitter. "A message from the scrap heap to the chrome drones. The sanitation drones had a scheduling conflict. The rust is coming for the chrome. The scrap prince sends his regards." He cut the broadcast. A grin, sharp and full of broken teeth, split his face. It was the first time he'd smiled without a trace of cynicism in years. The rust was coming. An unnerving silence, not to the gentle tones of his Enviro suite, awoke Lord Vylar of the Tenebrians. His private colony on Kyatha was his personal paradise, a world of rolling green hills and placid blue skies, populated by the Kyathans, a docile pre-FTL species he managed on behalf of the Council. They were his workforce, his servants, his aesthetic, and they were gone. He stumbled onto his balcony, overlooking the vast manicured fields where they were supposed to be tending his prized glow orchids. The fields were empty, the villages silent. His personal guard, a squad of his own house troops, reported that the orbital defense grid was offline. His private fleet of luxury yachts and transport ships, docked at the orbital spire, were not responding to hails. Their transponders were dark. Then he saw it. In the center of his vast, perfect lawn, an immense pattern had been burned into the grass. The work was too precise for crude vandalism. The edges of the giant letters were scorched black with military-grade exactness. "We are not yours." Panic, a vulgar and unfamiliar emotion, clawed at his throat. He screamed into his comms unit, demanding a report, a response, anything. All he got back was the automated distress call he'd sent to the Council High Command. He was the 12th Tenebrian aristocrat to file such a report in the last standard week, from 12 different managed worlds. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, no wreckage. The official reports listed it as mass desertion, an absurdity on its face. How could pre-industrial people disable an orbital defense grid and vanish with an entire fleet of advanced starships? There were no leads, just whispers, passed between terrified aristocrats in hushed tones. Whispers of ghost-like human operatives moving through their worlds unseen. Whispers of coordinated cells that could orchestrate the liberation of an entire planet's enslaved population in a matter of days, leaving behind nothing but a message. The Council, obsessed with the cowardly humans hiding behind their blockade, had no answer. They were looking for a fleet to fight, an army to crush. They were completely unprepared for an enemy that moved like a ghost and fought with an idea. The investigation into the death of General Bohr was a masterclass in official incompetence, and High Command Theron had a front-row seat. Bohr, a Byrog general, infamous for his brutal pacification of 3 separate junior species, had been found dead in his own quarters on Skycradle. The room had been locked from the inside. The corridor was guarded by his personal retinue. There were no signs of forced entry. The cause of death, according to the Tenebrian coroner's report, was a fast-acting neurotoxin, a very specific, very rare neurotoxin, synthesized from a fungus found only in the deepest, most polluted scrap heaps of a single planet, Gribnar. Theron sat on the investigative committee, listening to the testimony. Bohr's personal guards, a dozen hulking warriors from the subjugated Nos species, were questioned one by one. "Did you hear anything?" the Byrog investigator demanded, his voice echoing in the sterile interrogation room. "Nothing, Honored One," the Nos captain replied, his head bowed, his face a perfect mask of servility. "Did you see anyone enter or leave the General's corridor?" "No one, Honored One." They all had the same story. They saw nothing, they heard nothing, they did nothing. Theron looked into their eyes, the flat, placid gaze of a species long accustomed to feigning obedience. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to his core. They were lying, all of them. They had stood by and let it happen. They might have even held the door open. The assassin had walked past a dozen guards, poisoned a Byrog general in a locked room, and walked out again, and the official report would conclude it was the work of a stealth operative of unknown origin. The rot was spreading. Theron saw it everywhere now. The hairline crack in the high chamber wall had widened. The flickering lights in the lower corridors were now frequent, strobing blackouts that no one seemed to be fixing. The harmony chimes were permanently, jarringly out of tune. The perfect, pristine facade of Sky Cradle was beginning to crumble, and Theron felt like the only one who noticed the dust. The mud of Eos 9 was red, thick, and smelled of iron and blood. It clung to the armor of Corporal Maria Andonov's Marine Squad, a constant gritty reminder of how far they were from home. The Byrog invasion had been brutal, a full-scale ground assault by two of their most decorated legions. The Council expected a quick, decisive victory, a show of force to break the silent humans. They got trench warfare. Andonov and her squad were hunkered down in a reinforced ditch, the sky above them a strobing nightmare of pulse fire and flak bursts. Human-piloted mechs, repurposed heavy construction walkers, traded fire with Byrog assault tanks in the valley below. It was a meat grinder. "Down to our last power packs!" Sergeant Miles yelled over the din of battle. "Ammo's low. We can't hold this position for another hour," Andonov cursed, peering over the edge of the trench. A wave of Byrog infantry was forming up for another charge, their silver armor gleaming under the alien sun. They were done. Then she heard it. A high-pitched chittering and the rattle of machinery from behind them. She spun around, rifle raised, expecting to be flanked. A bizarre vehicle, a flatbed transport cobbled together from scrap metal and running on 6 mismatched wheels, bounced to a halt behind their trench. It was piloted by a half-dozen Grib, their small, wiry forms clad in scavenged armor plating. The one in the lead, who had what looked like a Tenebrian data slate welded to its helmet as a faceplate, gave a jaunty two-fingered salute. The air filled with the scent of hot metal, superheated air, and the strange peppery smell of Gribnar's native flora clinging to their gear. He hopped off the transport, chittering a string of unintelligible words and pointing to the crates stacked on the back. Andonov's helmet translator struggled for a moment, then spit out a garbled but understandable phrase. "Fresh death sticks for the soft skins. Compliments of the prince." Her squad stared in disbelief as the Grib started tossing down crates of human-made ammunition and fully charged power packs. They were resupplied by a guerrilla unit of alien junk scrappers, 1,000 light-years from any official Terran supply line. Andonov looked at the Grib leader. He grinned, a mess of sharp teeth, and gave her a grim nod. She nodded back. No words were needed. They didn't speak the same language, but they understood the meaning of shared ammo in a trench. The line would hold. The summons came late, delivered not by an official courier, but by a silent maintenance drone that projected a meeting coordinate onto Theron's apartment wall. It was a profound breach of protocol. It was terrifying. He went. The meeting was in a disused archive deep in the underbelly of Sky Cradle. The air was thick and still, carrying the scent of decaying pepper vellum from pre-digital eras and the faint, bitter aroma of overloaded circuitry from dying data slates. Waiting for him was Senator Elira of the Corvians, a species of avianoids known for their quiet dignity and long memory. With her were representatives from 5 other junior species. "Councillor Theron," Elira began, her voice soft but firm. "We apologize for the clandestine nature of this meeting. We believe you are a being of principle trapped within a system that has lost its own." Theron felt a cold dread. "What is this? What are you accusing me of?" "We accuse you of nothing," Elira said. "We are offering you a choice." She projected a holographic document into the air between them. It was the official tally for the vote on Ambassador Brandt's execution. The result was displayed in bold, triumphant script. Unanimous. Then she overlaid a second document. This one was encrypted, layered, and sourced from the Council's own secure servers. It showed the raw, unaltered data logs from the voting terminals. Theron's breath caught in his chest. The vote had not been unanimous. His own species, the Kalian, had abstained. The Corvians had voted no. In total, 16 junior species had either voted against the execution or abstained in protest. The High Triumvirate had simply lied. They had falsified the most sacred record of the Council to present a veneer of unity. Elira said, her feathers ruffling with suppressed anger, "They murdered more than a good man. They murdered the very idea of the Council. They have proven that our voices mean nothing." She gestured to the others in the room. "We have formed a secret political alliance. We call ourselves the Accord. There are over a dozen of us now, with more joining every day. We are planning to walk out of the Council, to publicly secede and expose this fraud to the entire galaxy." Theron was stunned, his mind reeling. "This is sedition. This will be civil war. They will crush you." "They will try," a gruff Nos senator interjected. "But they are fighting on too many fronts. They fight the humans, they fight the rust demons of the scrap prints, they fight ghosts on their own colony worlds. Their power is a shell. It's time to crack it." "We need your help," Elira continued, her gaze unwavering. "The final piece of evidence, the encrypted voice authorization of the High Counselor who ordered the tally changed, is stored in the deep archives. The security is biometric, keyed to a senior counselor. We cannot access it. You can." They were asking him to betray everything he had ever known, to risk not just his career but his life, the fate of his entire species. He was terrified. He looked at the faces around him, Corvian, Nos, Peltan, and saw the same steely resolve he had seen in Elijah Brandt's eyes as the flames consumed him. The harmony chimes were broken, the walls were cracked, the rot was real. "I will help you," Theron said, and the words felt like he was stepping off a cliff into open space. Captain Zara Omandi stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, a nexus where a dozen concurrent operations filled the air with a cacophony of voices and alerts, yet every officer moved with calm purpose. "Operation Avalanche is a go," she stated, her voice cutting through the hum of the bridge. "All task forces, report readiness." One by one, the icons on her main view screen blinked green. This was the masterstroke, the culmination of all the skirmishes and intelligence gathering. They weren't going to attack a planet. They weren't going to fight a fleet. They were going to break the machine. Task Force Scythe, you have the Scaran Gate. Task Force Hammer, the Tenebrian Primary. Task Force Ghost, you are clear for the Byrog home system. Omandi ordered. Intel from scrap prints is confirmed. The defense fleets are still on repositioning maneuvers, chasing phantoms. The gates are vulnerable. Using Mrek's vast network of scavengers and smugglers, who saw everything along the hyperplanes, Omandi had a real-time map of the Triumvirate's fleet movements. They were stretched thin, chasing rumors of human fleets, responding to Mrek's uprisings, putting out 100 fires at once. They had abandoned the castles to guard the fields. "Execute," Omandi said. across the galaxy, 3 separate human fleets, augmented by Grib Scorcher squads and even a few defecting junior species patrol ships, struck simultaneously. They didn't target the planets, they targeted the massive ring-like structures of the jump gates themselves. Using specialized torpedoes and the sheer brute force of mass driver rounds, they blew the stabilization rings and overloaded the singularity cores. At the Scaran home system, the gate went beyond a simple shutdown. It collapsed, tearing a temporary violent wound in space-time that would take years to repair. The core worlds of the High Triumvirate were severed from one another. Their fleets were stranded. Their empire was decapitated. Simultaneously, Leon's final information bomb detonated. The targeted propaganda had reached a tipping point. On 24 worlds, the local garrisons, composed mostly of junior species, laid down their arms or actively joined the populist uprisings. On Gribnar, Breck's Scorcher army, now hundreds of thousands strong and equipped with air-dropped human weapons, launched a blitzkrieg liberation. They freed their own planet and 2 neighboring client systems in a single glorious day of rust-fueled rebellion. The dominoes were not just falling, they were cascading. The Galactic Council was in emergency session, broadcast live across what remained of its fractured network. The High Chamber was a scene of panic and accusation. Crovis Clore was bellowing about treachery. Matriarch Ilara was demanding to know why her fleets were unreachable. And the Scaran High Counselor was trying in vain to restore order. "We must show strength! We must crush this human-led insurrection!" Crovis roared. It was then that Senator Elira of the Corvian stood. Her small, avianoid form seemed to command an impossible silence. "No," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "You will not, because this council, as of this moment, is dissolved." A gasp went through the chamber. Elira turned, and with a dignity that shamed the chaos around her, she walked toward the exit. She was joined by the senator from Nos, then the Peltan, then Theron. His face set with grim determination rose and followed. One by one, the representatives of the Accord, 16 species in all, stood and walked out of the High Chamber, leaving the Triumvirate and their few remaining sycophants sitting in stunned silence. As they walked, a new data packet flooded the Galactic Network. It was titled Project Rot. Inside was everything: 2 centuries of the Triumvirate's encrypted crimes, the full evidence of the species farming, the details of their financial corruption, and at the very top of the file, the unaltered original vote on Ambassador Brandt's execution. The entire package was sealed with a formidable layer of Tenebrian encryption. A final insult, a final show of their arrogance, but a note was attached. Decryption key required. Voice command, phrase, "Truth is not a body. It cannot be killed." On every screen, every terminal that received the file, a small audio player appeared. It was a clip from Leon's testimony. It was the voice of Elijah Brandt. As his recorded voice spoke those final defiant words, the files unlocked. The authority of the Galactic Council did not die in a blaze of glory. It evaporated in the silent, damning light of its own exposed truths. The remnants of the Byrog glorious fleets, the ships that had been stranded near Sol by Operation Avalanche, made one final desperate run at Earth. It was an act of pure, vengeful rage, a death cry. They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, expecting to face Ormandi's Third Fleet. They found it waiting for them, arrayed in a battle line of warships holding their position with minimal power, every gun port open and ready. But the Terran fleet was not alone. To their port side was a fleet of sleek, silver cruisers bearing the sigil of the Kalian. Theron had brought his people's navy with him. To their starboard, a chaotic but numerous swarm of Grib scav ships, their hulls scarred and ugly, but their weapon ports glowing with lethal energy. Flanking them were ships from a dozen other species, Corvian, Peltan, Nos, all of them bearing a newly painted symbol on their hulls, a single stylized orange flame, the symbol of the Accord. The Byrog admiral stared at his view screen in disbelief. He had come to fight humanity. He was facing the galaxy. The battle was short, less of a fight than a reckoning. The old guard, broken and alone, was swept away by the new coalition they had unwittingly created. Months later, the high chamber on Skycradle was dark and silent. The harmony chimes had been removed. The cracked marble was left unrepaired. It was a monument now, a museum to a fallen empire. Marek, now the formally recognized representative of the free Gribnar systems, walked through the cavernous room. With him was a small Grib child, her eyes wide with wonder at the scale of the place. He wore a simple but clean technician's jumpsuit, having refused the opulent robes offered to him. "This is where the shiny ones sat," he said to the child in their own chittering tongue, pointing a clawed finger at the high dais where the triumvirate once presided. "They thought the whole galaxy was their scrap heap." The child looked up at him, then walked timidly to the podium. From a pouch on her belt, she took out a small flickering glow rod, the kind Grib children made from phosphorescent minerals and scavenged power cells. She reached up on her toes and placed the tiny light on the vast, empty podium. It was a single warm point of light in the immense, oppressive darkness. A voice, soft and clear, filled the quiet air. It wasn't live, it wasn't a recording. The first entry in the new Galactic archive, narrated by a woman whose work was now taught in history courses. "They burned a man to silence a truth," the voice of Leon Velasquez said, no longer a propagandist, but a historian. "They believed that power was a hammer, meant to shatter anything that defied it. They were wrong. Power is a seed, and sometimes the most fertile ground is the ash of a martyr." In memory of Elijah Brandt, Quiet Hammer, External Spark.